The bright studio lights made everything feel bigger than it really was. The stage looked wide and empty, with only a grand piano sitting in the center. Rows of seats were filled with people who loved music, cameras, and moments that felt important. Millions more were watching from their homes, some cooking dinner, some scrolling on their phones, barely paying attention. No one expected this night to become something people would talk about for years. The teenage pianist stood just behind the curtain, waiting for her turn. Her hands felt cold even though the room was warm. She had played the piano since she was small. At home, her fingers moved easily. On small stages, she felt safe. But this was different. This was live television. Every mistake would be seen. Every breath would be heard. Still, she had worked too hard to turn back now. The host called her forward. She walked onto the stage slowly, trying to keep her shoulders straight. The applause was polite, not loud, not cold, just enough to remind her that people were watching. She bowed slightly and sat at the piano bench. The judges sat across from her, behind a long desk. One of them stood out more than the others. He was a famous maestro known across the world. He had trained top musicians and was praised for his high standards. People said he spoke the truth even when it hurt. As she adjusted the bench, the maestro leaned toward his microphone. He asked her age. She answered softly. He raised an eyebrow. Then he asked how long she had been playing. She told him the number of years, hoping it would sound like enough. He smiled, but it was not a warm smile. It was the kind that made her feel smaller. Before she could begin, he made a comment about young performers thinking they were ready before they truly were. He said the stage was not a place for practice but for mastery. The audience laughed lightly, unsure if they were supposed to. The teen froze for a moment. She had not expected to be spoken to like this before even touching a key. She tried to focus on the piano in front of her. The wood was smooth and dark. The keys were clean and bright. Music had always been her safe place. She believed that once she started playing, the noise around her would fade. But the maestro was not finished. He continued speaking, questioning her choice to appear on such a big show at her age. He talked about discipline and how many young players lacked it. His words were calm, but sharp. He never raised his voice, yet each sentence felt heavy. The cameras zoomed in on her face. She could feel her cheeks warming, her throat tightening. The host tried to move things along, but the moment had already changed. The audience felt it. Some people shifted in their seats. Others watched closely, sensing tension. The teen nodded politely, even though her heart was beating fast. She placed her hands on her lap, waiting for permission to begin. The maestro finally waved his hand slightly, as if granting her a chance. She took a breath and lifted her hands to the keys. For a brief second, there was silence. Then she started to play. Her opening notes were soft. Normally, she would let the music grow slowly. But tonight, her fingers felt stiff. She worried about every sound. Was it too quiet? Too slow? She could feel the maestro watching her closely. After a short while, he raised his hand again. He stopped her. The sound cut off suddenly, like a door slammed shut. He said the performance lacked confidence. He asked if she had truly prepared or if she was just hoping for luck. His words were calm but firm. The audience went silent. The teen looked down at the keys, blinking fast. She wanted to explain, but no words came out. He spoke again, saying that talent alone was not enough. That the piano was unforgiving. That mistakes stayed forever once played on a stage like this. He suggested she needed more years of training before facing judges like him. This time, the laughter did not come. The room felt uncomfortable. Some people looked at the floor. Others glanced at the other judges, hoping someone would step in. The teen nodded again, quietly apologizing, though she wasn't sure what she was apologizing for. The host thanked her and gently guided her off the stage. The applause that followed was louder than before, but it sounded different. It was not celebration. It was support. As she walked away, her head was down. The cameras followed her for a moment longer than they should have. Behind the scenes, she sat alone on a small chair near the wall. Her hands shook slightly. She pressed them together, trying to stop it. She told herself not to cry. She had promised herself she would be strong. Still, the words replayed in her mind. Too young. Not ready. Lacking discipline. Meanwhile, the show continued. The maestro leaned back in his chair, calm and confident. He spoke to the camera about standards in music. He said he believed honesty helped young performers grow. Online, people were already reacting. Clips of the moment spread fast. Some viewers agreed with him, saying the truth was harsh but necessary. Others felt something had gone too far. Within minutes, comments filled social media. People shared memories of times they had been embarrassed in front of others. Parents talked about their children and pressure. Musicians debated whether the maestro's words were fair or cruel. The teen's face, frozen in shock on screen, became an image shared everywhere. Backstage, she finally stood up and walked toward the exit. She did not know what would happen next. She only knew that the moment she had dreamed of for years had turned into something painful. Yet deep inside, beneath the hurt and confusion, something else began to grow. A quiet feeling she did not yet understand. A feeling that this was not the end of her story. Outside the studio, the night air felt cool. She took a deep breath and looked up at the dark sky. The lights behind her faded as the doors closed. She did not know it yet, but the moment meant to break her was about to change everything. The teen walked home slowly after the live show. The streets were quieter at night, but her mind was loud with thoughts she could not stop. Every step she took felt heavy. She remembered the maestro's words, calm but cutting, replaying like a broken record. Too young. Not ready. Lacking discipline. The words stung, not just because of what was said, but because millions of people had seen it. She reached her small apartment, the one she shared with her family. Her parents had always encouraged her music, reminding her that talent alone was not enough. But even they could not erase the memory of the stage. She closed the door and leaned against it, taking a deep breath. Her hands trembled slightly as she rested them on the edge of the table. Normally, she would sit at the piano and play to calm herself. But tonight, it felt different. The piano was the same one she had practiced on for years, but it felt like it belonged to someone else now, someone who could judge her too harshly. Her phone buzzed with notifications. Social media had already exploded. Videos of her brief performance circulated with captions criticizing her, praising the maestro, or questioning whether she belonged on such a stage. Some messages were supportive, telling her to keep going and ignore the harsh words. Others were cruel, saying she had embarrassed herself. She scrolled quickly, her stomach twisting as she read some of them. She wanted to cry, but she forced herself to put the phone down. She thought about her life so far. She remembered the small living room where she first touched the piano keys as a child. Her parents had watched her with pride, clapping when she played a simple tune correctly. The early morning lessons, the long afternoons practicing scales, the sacrifices she had made. All of it seemed to flash before her eyes. The stage tonight had been bigger than anything she had faced, and the world had judged her in an instant. Her mind drifted to past performances. There had been small competitions, school recitals, and community events. She had always felt nervous, but never like this. No one had ever laughed at her before. She remembered the way her fingers had stiffened under the bright lights, the way her heart had pounded in her chest. She realized that humiliation was not just about what was said, but how it made her feel small and exposed. Even though the night was dark, she found herself thinking about the future. She asked herself if she wanted to give up, to stop performing, to hide from the public eye. The thought was tempting. It would have been easier to avoid the piano for a while, to avoid facing judgment again. But deep inside, she knew she could not. Music was not just a hobby or a skill. It was part of who she was. The stage might be scary, but it was where she belonged. Her parents came into the room quietly. They did not need to say anything. They sat beside her and held her hands. There were no lectures, no advice, just warmth and presence. They knew that sometimes, words were not enough to heal the sting of embarrassment. They reminded her that mistakes and criticism were part of growth, even if it felt unbearable in the moment. The next morning, the world still seemed loud. Videos of her performance had millions of views, and the comments were still coming in. She saw clips of the maestro explaining his intentions, saying he wanted to push young players to improve. Some viewers agreed, others criticized him for being too harsh. The debate continued, but she felt detached from it. She could not change what happened on the stage. She could only decide what she would do next. She sat at her piano, her fingers hovering above the keys. For the first time, she played not to impress anyone, not to compete, not to perform. She played for herself. The notes filled the room softly, echoing off the walls. Her hands moved more freely than they had on stage, her heart lighter. The music reminded her why she had started playing in the first place. It reminded her that her journey was her own, and that she had the power to keep going no matter what anyone else said. Days passed, and she began to notice small changes. Friends and family reached out with encouragement, sharing memories of her talent and determination. Music teachers offered guidance, helping her see mistakes as opportunities rather than failures. She realized that public humiliation, as painful as it was, had also shown her the strength she did not know she had. She felt a new determination to improve, to practice harder, to be ready for the next challenge. She also began to watch other musicians, learning from their performances and interviews. She saw how even the best had moments of doubt, moments when audiences or critics did not understand them. This helped her feel less alone. She understood that the maestro's harsh words were not the end of her journey, but a part of it. He had underestimated her, but that did not define her ability or her future. Late at night, she often sat quietly, thinking about the stage, the lights, and the audience. She imagined herself playing a piece perfectly, letting the music speak louder than any criticism. She knew it would not happen overnight. She knew there would be setbacks and frustrations. But she also knew that she could face them. The humiliation she had felt had left a mark, but it had also sparked something new. A quiet fire, a determination to rise above what others thought of her. Her family continued to support her quietly, celebrating small victories in her practice, listening to new pieces, and reminding her that persistence mattered more than applause. Friends offered encouragement, sharing stories of their own struggles and how they had overcome them. Slowly, she felt a sense of community and understanding, a realization that she was not alone in facing judgment and criticism. Months passed, and she began to prepare a new repertoire, one that challenged her in ways she had never dared before. She focused on pieces that required deep concentration, emotional expression, and technical skill. She practiced for hours, learning patience and resilience. Every mistake became a lesson, every small success a reason to keep moving forward. She thought about the day she would return to a stage. She imagined the same bright lights, the same audience, and yes, the same maestro. But this time she wanted to be ready. She wanted her music to speak for itself, to show that talent and determination could not be ignored. She knew it would not be easy, but the memory of the public humiliation had given her something she had never had before. The understanding that the world would judge her, and that she had to rise above it. By the time the next opportunity arrived, she had grown stronger, not just in skill but in confidence. She knew her music, her practice, and her passion mattered more than anyone's opinion. The pain of the past lingered, but it was no longer a burden. It had become a reminder of her resilience, a story of overcoming fear and doubt, and a preparation for the moment when she would have her chance to shine again. She looked at the piano in her room, her fingers poised above the keys. She took a deep breath and began to play. The notes filled the room, confident and clear. She smiled softly, feeling the music flow through her. In that moment, she realized that humiliation could not destroy her spirit. It could challenge her, but it could never take away her love for music or her determination to grow. She had survived the first trial, and now she was ready for the next chapter of her journey. The days after the show passed slowly. Each morning, the teen woke with the memory of the maestro's words still in her mind. She walked to her piano, sat down, and let her fingers move over the keys. She did not play to impress anyone, not even herself. She played to understand what she could do, to feel the music without pressure. Each note was a small victory, a quiet reminder that she had not lost her love for the piano. She knew that the next chance would not come immediately. The world moved on quickly, and the news cycle was short. The maestro's comments were forgotten by many, but she could not forget them. She thought about the audience, the cameras, and the millions who had seen her embarrassed. She felt a mix of anger, sadness, and determination. She realized she had a choice: to shrink away or to let the music speak louder than any words. Late at night, she found herself alone in the practice room, working on a piece she had never dared to perform publicly. It was a complex composition, filled with long stretches of fast notes, difficult chords, and deep emotional shifts. She had practiced it quietly at home for months, never showing it to anyone. It was her secret challenge, something she wanted to master before the world saw it. Now, it became her goal, her response to the humiliation she had felt. The teen spent hours at the piano. Sometimes her hands would cramp, sometimes she would hit a wrong note, and sometimes the music would feel clumsy. She learned to breathe through it, to stop, correct herself, and try again. Each small success gave her confidence. Each mistake taught her patience. She realized that mastery was not about performing perfectly the first time. It was about refusing to give up, about returning to the keys with renewed focus. During the day, she watched videos of great pianists. She noticed how even the most talented performers had moments of struggle, moments where they had to fight doubt and fatigue. She read about musicians who had faced criticism and failure, but continued to practice in silence, building skill and resilience. This inspired her. She understood that her journey was not unique, and that those who had come before her had learned to turn challenges into strength. The teen also thought about the maestro. He had spoken harshly, but he had also recognized skill in his own way. She wondered what he would think if she returned with a performance that was flawless, filled with confidence, and full of heart. The thought made her nervous and excited at the same time. She imagined the stage, the audience, and the judge's expression as she played something beyond what anyone expected. She started setting small goals for herself. Each week, she would focus on a section of the piece, perfecting it until her fingers moved with ease. She recorded herself sometimes, listening carefully to the sound, learning what worked and what needed more practice. She learned to be patient with herself, understanding that real progress was quiet and gradual. She also kept a journal, writing down her thoughts, fears, and discoveries. It helped her see how far she had come and reminded her that determination mattered more than applause. Her family continued to support her, but they gave her space to grow on her own. They watched quietly as she practiced, offered gentle encouragement, and reminded her to rest. They did not pressure her to perform for anyone, understanding that her challenge was personal and that the public stage would come in time. Their belief in her gave her strength, even when she felt unsure. Weeks turned into months. The teen began to feel a shift inside herself. She no longer feared the stage as much. She still felt nervous, but she had learned to channel it into focus and energy. The music she played became more expressive, more confident, more herself. She realized that the maestro's words, though painful, had sparked a fire inside her. She did not want revenge. She wanted mastery, a quiet proof that she could rise above criticism and fear. One evening, she imagined herself back on the live show. She pictured the bright lights, the camera angles, and the audience waiting. She could see the maestro at his desk, skeptical and critical. But she no longer saw herself as small. She imagined sitting at the piano, her hands steady, her mind clear. She saw herself playing the difficult piece flawlessly, each note confident and deliberate. The thought gave her a rush of determination and hope. She also thought about the lesson she wanted to give herself. The humiliation had been real, but so was her ability to rise. She realized that she did not need to prove anything to the maestro or the audience. She needed to prove to herself that she could face challenges, endure criticism, and continue to grow. The stage would be a test, but the real journey was in the quiet hours of practice, in the dedication and courage that no one else saw. Her preparation became a daily ritual. She focused not only on technique but also on expression, on telling a story through the piano. She experimented with tempo, dynamics, and emotion. She imagined the audience listening, feeling the music, and being moved. Each practice session was a small triumph, each improvement a step closer to readiness. The teen also reflected on her own character. She realized that resilience was built not in easy moments, but in the face of adversity. She remembered the embarrassment, the doubt, the cold feeling of judgment, and understood that these experiences shaped her strength. She learned to control fear, to use it as motivation, rather than letting it paralyze her. She shared her journey quietly with her closest friends, people who understood her love for music and her dedication. They encouraged her, reminded her of her talent, and celebrated the small victories along the way. She felt a sense of community, a quiet reassurance that she was not alone, even if the world had judged her harshly. As time passed, she started imagining the day she would return to a public stage. She knew it would not be easy, but she felt ready. She had spent months preparing, practicing, and growing. She had turned humiliation into determination, doubt into skill, and fear into focus. She knew that when the time came, she would sit at the piano with confidence, letting the music speak louder than any words. In the stillness of the night, she sat at her piano, playing the piece she had prepared for months. Each note rang clearly, each passage flowed with grace. She closed her eyes and felt the music in her chest, in her hands, in her mind. She knew she was ready, not for revenge, not for applause, but for the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had worked, endured, and grown stronger than before. The choice she had made in silence, to continue despite fear and humiliation, had changed her. She had learned that true courage was not in avoiding challenges, but in facing them head-on. She had discovered the power of patience, persistence, and belief in herself. And she knew that when the moment finally came, she would be ready to let the music speak for everything words could not. The night of the performance arrived quietly, but the air felt electric. The studio was filled with bright lights, cameras, and an audience that seemed to hold its breath. The teen stood behind the curtain, her hands brushing lightly over the folds of the fabric. She could hear the hum of conversation, the shuffling of chairs, and the occasional laughter that felt distant to her. Her heart beat fast, but this time it was not fear alone. There was anticipation, focus, and the quiet thrill of being ready. The host called her forward. She walked onto the stage with calm steps, her back straight and her head held high. The audience clapped politely, then fell silent, sensing something important was about to happen. The piano gleamed under the lights, inviting her to take her place. She slid onto the bench and adjusted the height, her fingers hovering above the keys. For a moment, she closed her eyes and breathed in the calm she had built over months of practice. The maestro sat across from her, his expression calm but skeptical. He had not expected her to return. He had not expected her to prepare, to grow, or to challenge him with her skill. Some of the other judges whispered quietly, sensing tension in the air. The audience leaned forward slightly, the cameras ready to capture every movement, every expression. She began to play. The opening notes were soft, deliberate, and perfectly controlled. The studio seemed to hold its breath as the music unfolded. Each note carried clarity, each chord resonated fully, and each passage flowed seamlessly. Her hands moved with precision, but there was emotion as well, a story told through the piano that could not be described in words. The audience felt it. The maestro felt it. Even without looking at him, she sensed the change. The maestro's expression shifted slowly. His eyebrows lifted slightly, his eyes narrowing not in criticism, but in disbelief. He had underestimated her. He had assumed that youth and nervousness would hold her back. But now, in front of everyone, she was showing him and the world exactly what she was capable of. The room was silent except for the music, every listener caught in the flow of sound and emotion. The piece grew more complex, with fast passages that required both skill and focus. Her fingers moved across the keys like lightning, yet every note was controlled, deliberate, and full of feeling. The audience watched in awe. Some held their breath, afraid to blink, afraid to miss a moment of the music. The maestro leaned slightly forward, his usual calm demeanor replaced by surprise and admiration. He realized that the piece she played was beyond what he had imagined, a level of mastery he himself had never performed publicly. She reached the middle section of the piece, where the music demanded emotional depth and subtle expression. She let the sound breathe, holding notes that spoke of struggle, hope, and triumph. The audience was silent, some with hands on their hearts, some closing their eyes to feel the music fully. Every part of her being was in the performance, yet she appeared calm, in control, and completely present in the moment. The maestro could no longer hide his reaction. He shifted in his seat, his fingers tightening on the edge of the desk. For the first time, he did not interrupt, did not criticize. He simply watched, his expression unreadable but attentive. He had been a figure of authority and judgment for decades, but now he faced someone who could speak through music in a way that words could not contain. The silence that surrounded her performance was a testament to her skill and her determination. The final section approached, fast, intricate, and emotionally powerful. She felt the culmination of months of preparation, the quiet hours of practice, the struggles she had faced alone. Every note reflected not just her ability, but her growth, her courage, and her refusal to be defined by humiliation. She pressed on with focus and confidence, each chord ringing with clarity and emotion. As she struck the final note, the sound lingered in the air. The room remained silent for a heartbeat, as if time itself paused to acknowledge what had just happened. Then, slowly, applause began. It started softly, then grew louder, until the entire studio erupted. Some people stood, others clapped with tears in their eyes. The cameras captured the moment, zooming in on faces filled with admiration and surprise. The maestro finally spoke, his voice calm but heavy with acknowledgement. He said nothing of criticism. Instead, he admitted that the piece she had played was one he himself had never mastered. His words were few, but they carried respect, a recognition of talent and determination. The audience cheered louder, sensing the significance of the moment. It was not just a performance. It was a quiet victory, a testament to perseverance, growth, and the power of letting skill speak for itself. The teen smiled softly, a calm and satisfied expression. She did not shout or boast. She did not need to. The music had spoken louder than any words, and the applause confirmed it. The standing ovation continued, and for the first time, she felt completely at peace with herself, her journey, and her place in the world of music. As she left the stage, she felt the weight of the past lift slightly. The humiliation, the fear, the doubt, all of it had led to this moment. She realized that every challenge she had faced had prepared her for this performance. She understood that true strength was not just talent, but resilience, courage, and the willingness to rise above judgment and fear. Backstage, she was greeted by supportive words from her family, friends, and fellow musicians. She felt a sense of belonging, a quiet affirmation that her dedication and perseverance had been seen and respected. She did not need to prove anything further. The music had said everything. The maestro approached briefly, nodding in acknowledgement. There was no lecture, no critique, only respect. The teen realized that some victories are quiet, some lessons are learned in silence, and some moments are more powerful than words could ever express. She had returned, faced the challenge, and allowed her music to tell her story. And in that, she found not just recognition, but the deep satisfaction of having honored her own journey, her skill, and her courage. After the performance, the studio slowly returned to normal. The bright lights dimmed slightly, and the audience began to file out, some still murmuring about what they had just witnessed. The teen remained at the piano for a moment longer, letting the last echoes of the music fade into silence. She felt a deep calm, a sense of completion that was far different from the nervous tension she had felt months ago. This was not about applause or recognition. It was about proving to herself that she had the courage, skill, and focus to rise above criticism. Backstage, her family and friends waited. Their faces were full of pride and admiration. They hugged her, offering quiet words of encouragement, but mostly just letting her know they were there. She smiled and nodded, feeling the warmth of their support. For months, they had seen her practice tirelessly, struggle with self-doubt, and push herself past fatigue. They had shared her journey without ever demanding perfection, and now they could celebrate the result with her. The maestro remained at his seat for a moment, collecting his thoughts. He had expected humility, maybe hesitation, perhaps even an apology for returning to the stage. Instead, he witnessed mastery, confidence, and artistry. When he finally stood and approached, his steps were measured. He spoke quietly, not to the cameras or audience, but directly to her. He admitted that the piece she had performed was one he himself had never mastered, and that her skill had surpassed what he had imagined. There was no lecture, no critique, only acknowledgement. The teen listened silently, accepting the words with a calm nod. She realized then that respect does not need to be loud. It does not need applause or public recognition. Sometimes respect is quiet, shown in a look, a nod, or a simple acknowledgement of effort and skill. She had learned that the journey mattered more than any single performance. The months of preparation, the quiet practice sessions, the moments of doubt and fear, they had all contributed to this moment. And now, she understood that every challenge she faced had prepared her for it. As she walked through the studio halls, people approached her. Some were fans who had followed her story online, sending messages of encouragement and admiration. Others were fellow musicians who recognized the dedication it took to master such a difficult piece. They spoke to her with genuine respect, sharing their own experiences and offering congratulations. Each interaction reinforced what she already knew. The most important recognition comes from effort, perseverance, and belief in oneself. The teen thought back to the moment when the maestro had belittled her on live television. At the time, it had felt devastating. But now, she understood that moment differently. It had been a challenge, a test of character and resilience. She did not resent him, nor did she seek revenge. Instead, she used the experience as motivation to improve, to practice, and to grow stronger. The humiliation had become a catalyst for her determination, shaping her into a more confident and capable musician. She spent the next few days reflecting on the journey. She continued to practice, but now with a new perspective. Each session was a reminder of what she had achieved and a preparation for what lay ahead. She realized that the stage was only one part of her life as a musician. The true growth happened in the quiet moments, away from cameras and audiences, in the dedication and persistence that no one always sees. She learned to value these moments, understanding that they built the foundation for every future success. The teen also shared her experience with others. She spoke to younger musicians, encouraging them to face challenges with courage and to embrace the learning process. She explained that mistakes and criticism are part of growth, and that resilience and determination matter more than immediate recognition. Her story inspired those who listened, showing that talent alone is not enough, but perseverance and hard work can lead to remarkable achievements. Months passed, and her reputation as a skilled and determined musician grew. Invitations to perform arrived, not just on television but in concerts and events where her artistry could be appreciated. Each performance became an opportunity to showcase not only her technical skill, but also her ability to convey emotion and tell a story through music. She had learned that true artistry comes from the heart, combined with dedication and discipline. Even the maestro began to speak of her with respect. In interviews and discussions with colleagues, he acknowledged her talent and the growth she had demonstrated. The initial criticism he had offered was no longer the defining moment. Instead, it became a small part of a larger story, one in which the teen had proven herself through action rather than words. His recognition was important, not because she needed validation, but because it symbolized the impact of her perseverance and skill. The teen reflected often on the lessons she had learned. She understood that public judgment could be harsh and unforgiving, but it did not determine her worth or potential. She realized that setbacks and criticism were opportunities to grow stronger, to refine her craft, and to build confidence. She embraced the understanding that every challenge she faced was a step toward mastery, and that the journey itself was as valuable as any performance or accolade. As she continued to perform, she also became more compassionate toward others. She recognized that everyone faces doubt and fear, and that encouragement and support can make a difference. She shared her experiences, listened to others, and celebrated achievements, big and small. Her journey had taught her not only about music but also about resilience, empathy, and the power of persistence. The teen's story spread, inspiring many who had faced similar challenges. She became a symbol of courage and dedication, showing that talent combined with perseverance can overcome criticism and adversity. Her journey reminded people that growth often happens in quiet, unobserved moments, and that true recognition comes from effort, commitment, and the willingness to face challenges head-on. Looking back, she realized that every moment, from the initial humiliation to the triumphant performance, had shaped her. She had learned to listen to her own voice, trust her abilities, and embrace challenges as opportunities. She understood that mastery is not a destination but a journey, and that respect, whether earned quietly or publicly, comes from dedication, humility, and persistence. In the end, she knew that the most important acknowledgement was her own. She had faced fear, criticism, and doubt, and emerged stronger, more confident, and more capable. The music she played now was a reflection of her journey, a testament to her growth, and a reminder that courage and perseverance can overcome even the harshest judgment. She continued to play, not for recognition, not for applause, but because the piano had become a part of who she was. Every performance was an expression of her dedication, her resilience, and her love for music. She had turned humiliation into strength, doubt into determination, and fear into confidence. And in that, she found not just respect, but a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her journey, her effort, and her passion had brought her to a place of quiet triumph and lasting growth.